The mist clung to the cobbled streets of London's Chinatown like a shroud, weaving through the lanterns that flickered like wary eyes in the dusk of 1933. Inside the Jade Dragon tea house, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and oolong, masking something far more sinister. Amelia Worthington, the radiant heiress to a shipping fortune, sat poised at a lacquered table, her emerald necklace glinting under the dim lights. She sipped her tea gracefully, unaware that the brew held a deadly secret. Moments later, her cup shattered on the floor as she clutched her throat, gasping in agony. Patrons froze in horror as she collapsed, her eyes wide with unspoken accusation. Who among the shadows had orchestrated this fatal sip? The question hung in the air, a puzzle begging for a mastermind to unravel. Chapter 1. The Fatal Brew. The fog draped London's Chinatown in a ghostly veil, its tendrils curling around the crimson lanterns that swayed above narrow alleys in the autumn of 1933. The Jade Dragon tea house stood at the heart of this enclave, its lacquered doors promising warmth and exotic respite from the damp chill outside. Within, the air was heavy with the perfume of jasmine and oolong, the clink of porcelain cups a soft counterpoint to the murmur of patrons. At a corner table, Amelia Worthington, heiress to the Worthington shipping empire, sat in regal solitude. Her emerald necklace caught the glow of a nearby lantern, casting green flecks across her porcelain skin. She lifted her teacup with practiced grace, unaware that the brew within harbored a lethal secret. Moments later, the cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the polished floor as she clutched her throat, her gasp slicing through the room's ambiance. Her eyes, wide with terror and accusation, locked on some unseen betrayer before she crumpled, lifeless, amid the horrified stares of onlookers. The question hung unspoken in the smoky air. Who had poisoned the heiress in this den of delicate rituals? The scene was set for a puzzle that demanded a mind as sharp as quick, nasty, and public. Poirot's gaze swept the room, cataloging details with the precision of a watchmaker. The overturned chair spoke of a hasty exodus by patrons, the spilled teapot on Amelia's table a silent witness to her final moments. Her body, now draped with a white sheet, lay beside the table, the emerald necklace still glinting defiantly. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his Belgian accent lending a musical cadence to his words. "The little gray cells, they are already at work. Cyanide, you say? A poison most bold, to be administered in such a public place. Tell me, who was present when the tragedy occurred?" Jap flipped open his notebook, his pencil stub worn to a nub. "We've got a handful of suspects, each with a story to tell. First, there's Reginald Worthington, her brother. He stands to inherit the lion's share of the family fortune now she's gone. Claims he was at his gentleman's club across town, but we're checking his alibi. Then there's Evelyn Hartley, the mistress of Amelia's fiancé, Charles Langley. Word is, Amelia knew about the affair and wasn't pleased, threatened to cut Charles out of her will. Evelyn's a sharp one, all charm and no conscience. Next, Li Wei, the owner of this tea house. He had a bone to pick with the Worthingtons, some old business deal with their shipping company that left his family in ruins. Then there's Clara Benson, Amelia's maid, who poured the tea herself. Swears it was clean, but she's jumpy as a cat. And finally, Dr. Harlan Thorpe, the family physician. He prescribed tonics for Amelia's nerves and was seen lingering near the tea house earlier today. Poirot knelt beside the table, his gloved fingers brushing the edge of the shattered teacup. A faint residue, barely visible, clung to the porcelain's interior. He sniffed delicately, his nose wrinkling at the acrid hint beneath the tea's floral notes. The cyanide. It was in the cup, But how was it delivered? The teapot, the sugar, the tea leaves themselves, each is a possibility. Rising, he noticed a small crumpled piece of paper huddled in a corner, whispered among themselves, their eyes darting nervously. Poirot approached Li Wei, who stood rigidly behind the counter, his hands clasped as if in prayer. Monsieur Li, this tea-house, it is your domain, no? You prepared the tea for Mademoiselle Worthington? Li Wei bowed slightly, his expression unreadable. I oversee all preparations, Mr. Poirot. But her tea was from our finest blend, reserved for honored guests. I poured it myself, and it was untouched until it reached her table. His voice carried a soft lilt, the cadence of his native tongue softened by years in London. Yet his eyes, dark and guarded, betrayed a flicker of unease. And this teapot, Poirot said, gesturing to the overturned vessel. It was used only for her? He examined it closely, noting a faint scratch on the spout, as if it had been tampered with. Curious. A mark that should not be there. Li's composure faltered for a moment. Many hands touch these pots. Perhaps a clumsy server. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone neutral but his mind racing. He moved to Clara Benson, who stood wringing her hands near the kitchen door. Her apron was pristine, but her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Mademoiselle Clara, you served the tea. Did you notice anything unusual? A smell, a hesitation from your mistress? Clara shook her head vigorously. No, sir, nothing. I poured it like always. Miss Amelia, she added her own sugar, she always did, from her little silver case. She was so kind, sir, never a cross word to me. Her voice cracked, and she dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Poirot noted the faint yellow stain on its edge. Cyanide could leave such a mark. But was it evidence or coincidence? Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said, dismissing her gently. He turned to Jap. The sugar, the teapot, the note. These are the threads of our tapestry. Handkerchief. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Amelia Worthington's death was no random act. It was a performance, staged with precision. And Poirot, with his little gray cells, was determined to uncover the director. As he stepped into the foggy street, the lanterns above cast eerie halos, their light barely piercing the gloom. The Jade Dragon Tea House loomed behind him, its secrets locked within. Somewhere in this labyrinth of motives and misdirection, the truth awaited. But as Poirot's footsteps echoed on the cobbles, a faint creak sounded from the alley. A door, perhaps, or a footfall. The game was afoot, and the killer was watching. Chapter 2. Shadows of Inheritance. The fog of London's Chinatown had thickened by the time Hercule Poirot stepped out of the Jade Dragon Tea House, its lanterns now mere smudges of crimson in the gray dusk of 1933. The chill air bit at his gloved fingers as he adjusted his scarf, his mind still swirling with the details of Amelia Worthington's poisoning. The crumpled note, "Beware the dragon's breath," weighed heavily in his pocket, its cryptic message a taunt from the killer. Inspector Japp had remained behind to oversee the constables, but Poirot's destination was clear: the Worthington mansion in Mayfair, where the heiress's brother, Reginald, awaited. The little gray cells, as Poirot often called his keen intellect, were already piecing together the threads of motive and opportunity. A public poisoning in a tea house was no accident. It was a statement, bold and theatrical, but who had the audacity to orchestrate such a crime? The Worthington mansion loomed like a monument to wealth, its Georgian facade gleaming under the street lamps despite the fog's persistent embrace. A butler, stiff as a tin soldier, ushered Poirot into a drawing room adorned with gilded mirrors and velvet drapes. Reginald Worthington stood by the fireplace, a cigar smoldering between his fingers, his tailored suit immaculate but his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. He was a man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered, with the arrogant tilt of slightly as he gestured, the cigar's ember flaring with each agitated movement. Besides, I've witnesses at the gentlemen's club. Ask them. Witnesses? Oui. I shall verify, Poirot said, his tone neutral. But permit me a small observation. The hands, they betray the heart. Yours, they shake. Is it grief or something else? Reginald's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, turning to pour a brandy from a crystal decanter. Poirot rose, his attention drawn to a mahogany desk in the corner. Among the clutter of papers, bills, letters, a racing form, he spotted a folded receipt, its edge peeking from beneath a ledger. With a discreet glance to ensure Reginald was distracted, Poirot unfolded it. A chemist's receipt for cyanide, dated 2 days prior, purchased for vermin control in the warehouse. A convenient explanation or a damning clue? For vermin, you say? Poirot murmured, holding up the receipt as Reginald turned. The man's face paled, though he recovered quickly. Exactly that, Reginald snapped. Our warehouses have rats. Nothing sinister about it. But the sweat beading on his brow told a different story. Poirot pocketed the receipt, his mind cataloging it as a potential red herring. Cyanide was too obvious, too easily traced. Perhaps a deliberate misdirection by a cunning mind. Leaving the mansion, Poirot's next stop was the lavish flat of Evelyn Hartley, the mistress of Amelia's fiancé, Charles Langley. The building, in a fashionable corner of Bloomsbury, was all Art Deco elegance, its brass fixtures gleaming under electric lights. Evelyn greeted him in a silk dressing gown, her auburn hair cascading over one shoulder, her smile as calculated as a chess move. "Mr. Poirot, how charming," she purred, reclining on a chaise longue. "I suppose you're here about poor Amelia. Such a dreadful shock. But surely you don't think I had anything to do with it?" Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching. "Mademoiselle Hartley, it is said that love and jealousy are close companions." Veiled woman. How melodramatic. "I was at the theater, as I said. Perhaps you should ask Charles. He was with me for part of the evening." Her tone was defiant, but Poirot detected a crack in her composure, like a flaw in fine porcelain. He thanked her and departed, his mind turning over the torn ticket. A theater usher, he decided, must be questioned. Was Evelyn's alibi as solid as she claimed? Or was it another piece of the killer's sleight of hand? As Poirot stepped into the fog-laden street, a message from Jap awaited him, delivered by a breathless constable. "Sir, we've got something. A witness saw Miss Hartley near the Jade Dragon Tea House not half an hour before Amelia collapsed. Recognized her red coat." Poirot's eyes gleamed. The web of deceit was tightening, but Evelyn's presence seemed almost too convenient. A true culprit would cover their tracks better, would they not? Or was she banking on her charm to deflect suspicion? Back at his modest flat in Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot spread his notes across a polished table, the receipt and the dragon's breath note side by side. The cyanide purchase pointed to Reginald, but its blatancy suggested a plant. Evelyn's torn ticket and reported sighting near the tea house painted her as a suspect, yet her brazen confidence hinted at deeper cunning. Leeway's tampered teapot, Clara's stained handkerchief, Dr. Thorpe's proximity, all were threads in a tapestry of deception. Poirot sipped a tisane, its warmth steadying his thoughts. The killer had orchestrated this crime with theatrical flair, leaving clues that both illuminated and obscured the truth. He rose, pacing the room, his cane tapping a rhythmic beat. The Worthington fortune was the heart of the motive, but whose heart burned hottest for it? Reginald, with his trembling hands and convenient alibi? Evelyn, with her torn ticket and veiled sightings? Or another, lurking in the shadows, manipulating the stage? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustle outside his window. He parted the curtains, peering into the fog. A figure stood across him, but the little gray cells were tireless. Tomorrow he would confront the theater usher, verify Leeway's teapot, and probe Clara's stains. The fog might obscure the path, but Poirot's mind was a beacon cutting through the haze. And somewhere, in the labyrinth of Chinatown's secrets, the killer waited, unaware that their performance was nearing its final act. Chapter 3. The Dragon's Grudge. The fog of London's Chinatown clung to the cobbles like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant cries of street vendors as Hercule Poirot returned to the Jade Dragon tea house. It was the morning after Amelia Worthington's poisoning, and the air of 1933 carried a damp chill that seeped into the bones. The tea house, though shuttered to the public, buzzed with the quiet efficiency of Scotland Yard's constables, their lanterns casting long shadows across the lacquered walls. Poirot's polished shoes clicked on the wooden floor as he navigated past the cordoned-off table where Amelia had met her end, her emerald necklace now in evidence, its green fire extinguished. The crumpled note, "Beware the dragon's breath," burned in his mind, a riddle pointing either to truth or deception. His little gray cells hummed, piecing together the mosaic of suspects. Reginald's trembling hands, Evelyn's torn theater ticket, and now the enigmatic Leeway, the tea house owner whose family had clashed with the Worthingtons' shipping empire. The scent of jasmine lingered, but beneath it, Poirot sensed the acrid tang of secrets. Inspector Japp met him at the counter, his face etched with the strain of a sleepless night. "Poirot, you're back early. Found anything in that fancy head of yours?" His Cockney growl was softened by familiarity, but his eyes darted to the back room where Leeway awaited. "Mon ami," Poirot replied, adjusting his Homburg hat. "The head, it is not fancy, but precise. The note, the cyanide, the teapot. These are not accidents, but choreography. Let us speak with Monsieur Leeway, for shipping undercut my father's trade routes to Shanghai. Their greed left us destitute. Amelia, she came here often, flaunting her wealth, but I served her as I would any guest. To poison her would dishonor my ancestors." Poirot's gaze drifted to the shelves, noting a jar labeled Dragon's Breath Blend, its characters bold against the porcelain. He approached the overturned teapot from Amelia's table, now in evidence on a cloth. His gloved fingers traced a faint scratch on the spout, a mark he had noticed the previous night. "This teapot, it was reserved for her, you said. Yet this mark, most curious. It suggests tampering, non?" Lee's hands tightened briefly. Many hands touch these pots. Servers, cleaners. A scratch is nothing unusual. But his voice held a tremor, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, Poirot said, but let us examine further. He lifted the teapot's lid, sniffing delicately. The scent of oolong was strong, but a bitter undertone lingered, faint but unmistakable. The cyanide. It was in the cup, but was it in the pot? Or perhaps elsewhere? He turned to a nearby shelf, where a small vial caught his eye, its contents a pale liquid labeled as an herbal tonic. This vial, Monsieur Lee, what is its purpose? Lee hesitated. A traditional remedy, for calming nerves. Harmless. Some patrons request it. Poirot uncorked it, the scent sharp but not quite cyanide. A potential red herring, designed to mislead? He handed it to Japp for analysis, his mind cataloging the possibility of a clever substitution. Leaving Lee for the moment, Poirot sought out Clara Benson, Amelia's maid, who waited in the tea-house's small kitchen. Clara was a slight woman in her late 20s, her brown hair pinned tightly, her apron crumpled from nervous twisting. Her eyes, red from crying, darted to Poirot as he entered. Mr. Poirot, sir, I swear I didn't do nothing wrong. I poured Miss Amelia's tea like always, from the pot Mr. Lee gave me. She was so good to me, paid off my debts. She fell. I was so shaken I didn't notice. Her voice cracked and Poirot patted her shoulder, dismissing her gently. The stain was a clue, but whether it pointed to guilt or accident remained unclear. Returning to the main room, Poirot conferred with Japp, who had received a preliminary report from the lab. The vial's contents are harmless, just herbs, as Lee said. But the teapot's residue is trickier. Traces of cyanide, but diluted, like it was wiped clean. Someone's covering their tracks, Poirot. Oui, mon ami, Poirot said, tapping his cane. The dragon's breath. Perhaps it is not the tea, but the sugar, or even the air of deceit in this place. The note. It points to Monsieur Lee, yet feels too deliberate, a distraction. He paced the room, his eyes scanning the ornate screens that divided the tea-house into alcoves. Each could conceal a watcher, a poisoner slipping cyanide into a cup or sugar case. The waiter, Tommy, had mentioned a veiled woman. Evelyn Hartley? But no clear description emerged. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the tea-house door. A constable admitted a young delivery boy who handed Japp a note. Found this slipped under the door, sir. Japp unfolded it, his face darkening as he read aloud. The dragon watches. Leave the past buried. The handwriting matched the dragon's breath note, its ink stark and fresh. Poirot's mustache twitched. A second warning, and so soon. The killer grows bold, or desperate. He examined the note, noting its crisp paper, unlike the crumpled one from Amelia's clutch. This is no coincidence, Japp. Someone wishes to steer us toward Monsieur Lee, or away from the true path. As the morning waned, Poirot stepped outside, the fog now a heavy curtain that swallowed the street. He revisited the alley beside the tea-house, where the shadowy figure had vanished the previous night. The cobbles were slick, but a glint caught his eye. A single pearl button, half buried in the mud. He retrieved it with his handkerchief, its luster suggesting wealth, perhaps, and the veiled figure to Evelyn's flimsy alibi. The dragon's breath note was too poetic, too deliberate, a red herring meant to implicate Li Wei, or a genuine warning from Amelia's killer. As Poirot prepared to leave, a sharp crash echoed from the alley. A brick hurled through a side window, narrowly missing his head. Glass scattered across the floor, and Japp shouted for the constables to search the street. Poirot remained calm, his eyes gleaming. "The killer is close, mon ami, and they fear exposure. This brick, it is a message, as much as the note." He examined the shards, noting a faint smudge of red wax on the brick's edge, sealing wax, perhaps from a letter or package. Another clue, or another diversion? The fog pressed closer as Poirot stepped into the street, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The Jade Dragon tea house loomed behind him, its secrets locked within its walls. Liwei's grudge, Clara's stains, the veiled woman, the pearl button, the red wax, each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The killer was watching, their steps echoing in the mist. But Poirot's little gray cells were relentless. The truth was near, hidden in the shadows of Chinatown's labyrinth. Chapter 4. Medical Mysteries. The fog of London's Chinatown had begun to lift as Hercule Poirot made his way to Dr. Harlan Thorpe's clinic in Harley Street, the heart of the city's medical district. It was late morning, October 1933, and the air carried a crisp bite, though the sun struggled to pierce the gray veil above. The Jade Dragon tea house's grim tableau, Amelia Worthington's poisoned body, the cryptic dragon's breath note, the tampered teapot, and Clara's stained gloves lingered in Poirot's mind, each clue a fragment of a puzzle demanding his little gray cells. The brick hurled through the tea house window, marked with red wax, had escalated the stakes. The killer was not merely cunning but reckless, their desperation a sign that Poirot's probing was drawing blood. Dr. Thorpe, the Worthington family physician, was the next thread to unravel. His proximity to Amelia significant, no? You prescribed tonics for her nerves, oui? And yet she was poisoned by cyanide, a substance not unfamiliar to a man of medicine. Thorpe adjusted his spectacles, his fingers steady but deliberate. Cyanide is a controlled substance, Mr. Poirot. Hardly something I'd keep in my dispensary. Amelia consulted me for mild anxiety, nothing serious. I prescribed a sedative, a standard herbal tonic. To suggest I'd poison her is absurd. His tone was firm, but Poirot noted a slight flush creeping up his neck. Absurd, perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but probing. Yet you had dealings with Worthington Shipping, did you not? Investments, I am told, that soured when Mademoiselle Worthington blocked a lucrative deal. A motive, perhaps, for a man whose fortunes faltered. Thorpe's jaw tightened. My investments were minor, and yes, I lost money when Amelia vetoed that merger. But murder? I'm a physician, not a villain. He opened a drawer, producing a ledger. Here, my records of her prescriptions. Nothing harmful, I assure you. Poirot examined the ledger, noting a recent entry for a tonic bottled just days before Amelia's death. The label matched the vial found in Liwei's tea house. It scent herbal but innocuous. A coincidence or a deliberate link? Merci, docteur, Poirot said, rising to inspect a cabinet of vials and bottles. His gloved fingers paused on one labeled herbal tonic, identical to Lee's. This bottle, it is the same as Mademoiselle Worthington's? You supplied it to her directly? Thorpe nodded, though his eyes flickered. I gave her a bottle last week. She preferred my prescriptions over patent medicines. But I assure you it was harmless. Poirot uncorked the vial, sniffing carefully. The scent was familiar, but a faint chemical undertone raised his suspicions. Was it possible the tonic had been tampered with, swapped for poison? He handed it to a constable for analysis, his mind racing. Leaving the clinic, Poirot's next stop was Charles Langley, handed the letter to Poirot. who unfolded it to find a plea for secrecy, written in haste. Evelyn, we must end this. Amelia knows, but she's willing to forgive. Don't ruin it. A red herring, or a sign of deeper collusion? Poirot's thoughts returned to the tea-house clues, the tampered teapot, Clara's stained gloves, the pearl button in the alley, the red wax on the brick. Now, Thorpe's tonic and Charles's letter added layers to the mystery. Had Thorpe swapped the tonic for cyanide, motivated by his financial losses? Had Charles and Evelyn conspired to secure Amelia's fortune? The dragon's breath note still nagged at Poirot. Its theatricality suggested a mind that delighted in misdirection. As he left Charles's flat, Poirot received a message from Jap, delivered by a panting constable. The lab's results on Lee's vial and Thorpe's tonic, both clean, but the teapot's residue shows traces of cyanide, though it's been wiped down. And that pearl button? High-end, likely from a lady's glove. Could be Evelyn's, or someone posing as her. Poirot's mustache twitched. The button, the wax, the note, all pointed to a killer who thrived on theatrics, planting clues to confuse. Back at his flat in Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot spread his notes across the table, the fog outside pressing against the windows like a silent accomplice. He sketched a timeline. Amelia's last visit to Thorpe's clinic, her tea at the Jade Dragon, the veiled woman's appearance, the brick's warning. The tonic vial linked Thorpe to Lee, but its harmless contents suggested a deliberate misdirection. The pearl button hinted at wealth, Evelyn's red coat or Clara's borrowed gloves, and Charles's letter, so conveniently found, felt like a prop in a play. Poirot sipped a tisane, its warmth steadying his thoughts. The killer was close, their desperation evident in the brick's violent message. He recalled the red wax smudge, sealing wax, perhaps from a letter or package, a clue tying back to the Worthington mansion or Thorpe's clinic. He made him turn. A gloved hand slipped a note into his coat pocket before its owner vanished into an alley. Poirot unfolded it, his pulse quickening. Stop digging, or join her. The handwriting matched the dragon's breath note, its ink fresh, its threat unmistakable. Poirot's eyes gleamed with resolve. The killer was circling, their moves bolder, their mistakes nearer. The tonic, the wax, the button, the letter, each was a stroke in a portrait of betrayal. But whose hand held the brush? As he hailed a cab, the fog swirled and a distant footstep echoed. The game was afoot, and Poirot was closing in. Chapter 5. Twisted Alliances. The fog over London's Chinatown had thinned to a ghostly haze, but the streets of 1933 remained cloaked in secrets as Hercule Poirot arrived at Scotland Yard. The morning light filtered weakly through the windows of Inspector Japp's cluttered office, where files and coffee cups competed for space on a battered desk. The air was thick with the scent of ink and tobacco, a fitting backdrop for the tangled web of Amelia Worthington's murder. Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with the clues amassed thus far. The dragon's breath note, the tampered teapot, Clara's stained gloves, the pearl button, the red wax on the brick, and now the threatening note slipped into his pocket. Stop digging or join her. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot sensed the killer's desperation growing with every step he took. Today he aimed to tighten the net around the suspects. Reginald Worthington, Evelyn Hartley, Lee Way, Clara Benson, and Dr. Harlan Thorpe. The question was not just who had poisoned Amelia, but who had woven the alliances that made such a public crime possible. Jap greeted Poirot with a weary grunt, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. "Morning, Poirot. Lab's got something new. Cyanide traces in the teapot, but faint, like someone tried to clean it. And the chemist's receipt for cyanide? Purchased under a false name. No fingerprints. Someone's playing a clever game." He slid a report across the desk, its pages detailing the chemical analysis. "We're digging into the veiled woman's sighting. Still no clear match to Evelyn Hartley. But that red coat's suspicious." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching as he scanned the report. "Mon ami, the game is indeed clever, but not without flaws. The absence of fingerprints, it is deliberate. A killer who plans but cannot erase all traces. Let us revisit Mademoiselle Clara Benson. For her gloves, they tell a story." He adjusted his Homburg hat, his gray eyes gleaming with purpose. The stained gloves, the threatening note, the red wax, all pointed to a conspiracy. "Sir, Miss Amelia was going to disinherit Mr. Reginald. He'd been gambling, draining the family funds. She said the fortune should go to charity, to make amends for the shipping company's wrongs." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She swore me to secrecy, but I think Mr. Reginald overheard us once." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Most interesting, mademoiselle. And this secret, it could drive a man to desperate acts, no?" Clara nodded, tears welling. Poirot noted her sincerity, but also the handkerchief. Its edge bore a faint yellow stain, like her gloves. Was she a victim of circumstance, or a pawn in a larger scheme? Leaving the mansion, Poirot and Jap headed to Bloomsbury to confront Evelyn Hartley again. Her flat was as opulent as before, its Art Deco elegance a stark contrast to the grim purpose of their visit. Evelyn lounged on a velvet sofa, a cigarette holder in hand, her auburn hair catching the light. "Back so soon, Mr. Poirot," she drawled, her smile sharp. "I do hope you found someone else to pester. My theater alibi holds, I presume?" Poirot inclined his head, his cane tapping softly. "Mademoiselle Hartley, your alibi is intriguing but flawed. The usher at the Palladium recalls you leaving early, claiming you needed air. And a witness places a woman in a red coat near the tea house. Your coat, perhaps?" Evelyn's laugh was brittle. "A red coat? Half of London wears red, darling. I left the theater briefly, yes, but only to smoke. The play was dreadful." She gestured to a cigarette case, its silver surface gleaming. Poirot noted a pearl button on her sleeve, similar to the one found in the alley, but not identical. A red herring? Or a clue to another player? Jap pressed her. "Miss Hartley, we know you were near the tea house. Care to explain?" Evelyn's composure wavered, her fingers tightening on the cigarette holder. "I was nearby, yes, shopping in Chinatown. But I didn't go inside. I swear it." Her eyes darted to their business. Lee's hands froze, his calm cracking. "Smuggling? I know nothing of such things. My family's ruin was their greed, not crimes." But his voice wavered, and Poirot pressed further. "A witness saw you arguing with Mademoiselle Worthington days before her death. What was said?" Lee sighed, his shoulders sagging. "She apologized for her father's actions, offered to invest in my business. I refused, pride, perhaps. But I did not kill her." Poirot noted the admission, suspecting Lee knew more about the Worthingtons' dealings than he let on. As they left the tea house, Jap received a call from the yard. "The ushers confirmed. Evelyn left the theater at 7:15. Plenty of time to reach the tea house before Amelia's death at 7:45. And we've got a lead on the veiled woman. A shopkeeper saw her buying herbs near Lee's place, but no face. Poirot's mind raced. The veiled woman, the red wax, Clara's secret about the will, all pointed to a network of motives, with the fortune at its heart. Back at his flat, Poirot spread his notes across the table, the fog outside now a faint mist. He sketched connections. Reginald's gambling and disinheritance, Evelyn's broken alibi and wax-sealed letter, Lee's grudge and possible smuggling ties, Clara's stained gloves and secret knowledge, Thorpe's tonic and financial losses. The threatening note, "Stop digging or join her," was a desperate move, suggesting the killer feared exposure. As night fell, Poirot's telephone rang, the sound jarring in the quiet. He lifted the receiver, hearing a distorted voice. "The dragon awakens. Cease or suffer." The line went dead, but Poirot's pulse quickened with excitement, not fear. The voice was disguised, but its urgency betrayed the killer's proximity. Was it Thorpe, protecting his secrets? Evelyn, guarding her affair? Or another, manipulating from the shadows? Poirot stepped to the window, peering into the street. A figure lingered under a lamp, their face obscured by a hat's brim. Killer's latest warning. "The dragon awakens," echoed in his mind. Its theatrical flourish, suggesting a mind both cunning and cornered. Poirot's investigation had stirred the hornet's nest, and the suspects, Reginald Worthington, Evelyn Hartley, Lee Way, Clara Benson, and Dr. Harlan Thorpe, were each entangled in motives of greed, betrayal, and revenge. Today he sought a new thread, Amelia's private papers, which might reveal the secrets that drove someone to murder. The mansion's grand hall was a study in opulence, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. A butler ushered Poirot into Amelia's private study, a room of mahogany and leather, its walls lined with books and portraits of stern Worthington ancestors. Inspector Japp, who had joined him with a warrant, rummaged through a desk drawer, his face creased with frustration. "Poirot, we've got nothing solid yet. The lab's still analyzing that red wax, but it's common enough, used by half the gentry. That pearl button's from a high-end glove, likely a lady's, but no match to Evelyn or Clara yet." Poirot's mustache twitched as he surveyed the room. "Mon ami, the truth hides in the details. Mademoiselle Worthington, she was a woman of secrets, no? Her diary, her letters, they will speak when the living will not." His eyes fell on a locked rosewood box on the desk, its brass fittings gleaming. With Japp's approval, he picked the lock with a delicate tool, revealing a leather-bound diary and a bundle of letters tied with a silk ribbon. The diary's pages were filled with Amelia's elegant script, each entry a window into her world of wealth and betrayal. Poirot read aloud, his voice soft but deliberate. October 10th. Reginald's gambling debts grow worse. He begs for funds, but I cannot condone his recklessness. The fortune must be protected, perhaps redirected to charity. Another entry dated a week prior. Evelyn's claws are in Charles, but I will not yield. If he betrays merger to secure the family's future. The tone was polite but insistent, hinting at desperation. Another letter from Evelyn was less subtle. "Amelia, you can't keep Charles chained. Let him go, or I'll make sure everyone knows your family's dirty secrets. a threat, veiled but clear, suggesting blackmail. Poirot's gaze sharpened. These letters, they are a map of motives. Reginald's greed, Evelyn's jealousy, Thorpe's losses, and perhaps Lee's revenge. But there is more, Jap. The dragons in Amelia's diary. Could they point to smuggling, as I suspected? He pocketed a letter for further analysis, its wax seal a potential link to the killer. Their next move was to the chemist's shop near Chinatown, where the cyanide had been purchased under a false name. The chemist, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, peered at Poirot over his spectacles. "A woman bought it, sir, 2 days before the murder. Wore a veil, spoke softly, paid in cash, said it was for rats in a warehouse." Poirot's mind flashed to Evelyn's red coat and Clara's nervous demeanor. A veiled woman, again, another piece of the puzzle, or a deliberate misdirection. Back at the tea house, Poirot sought Clara once more, finding her in the kitchen, scrubbing pots with a fervor that spoke of guilt or fear. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said, his voice gentle. "You knew of Mademoiselle Worthington's plans to disinherit her brother. Did you share this with anyone? Perhaps Dr. Thorpe?" Clara's hands froze, soap suds dripping to the floor. "Dr. Thorpe? No, sir, but I must confess something." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Miss Amelia knew a secret of mine. My child, born out of wedlock. The father, it's Dr. Thorpe. She promised to protect us, but if he knew, she told me to keep quiet." Her eyes filled with tears and Poirot's heart softened, though his mind remained sharp. A child, a scandal, another motive for Thorpe, or a reason for Clara to fear exposure. Jap, Will. Evelyn's blackmail and torn alibi. Thorpe's desperate merger and wax-sealed letter. Clara's secret child. Lee's smuggling hints. The threatening note and phone calls suggested a killer on edge, their alliances fraying. As he pondered, a sharp screech of tires outside made him leap to the window. A black car sped away, its driver obscured, but a glint on the pavement caught his eye. A second pearl button, identical to the first. Poirot retrieved it, his pulse quickening. "The killer leaves gifts, but they are careless," he murmured. The button, the wax, the diary. All pointed to a conspiracy. But who was the mastermind? He returned to the diary, rereading Amelia's cryptic entry about dragons. A memory surfaced, a shipping manifest he'd glimpsed in Reginald's study, listing crates marked dragon imports. Was this the smuggling ring Amelia had uncovered? Had she threatened to expose it, sealing her fate? Poirot made a note to investigate the Worthington ships, suspecting Lee Way or Thorpe might be entangled. As night fell, the telephone rang again, its jangle cutting through the silence. Poirot lifted the receiver, expecting another threat, but heard only heavy breathing before the line went dead. He smiled grimly. The dragon is restless, but Hercule Poirot is relentless. The clues were mounting. The diary, the buttons, the wax, the smuggling hints. But the killer's identity remained just out of reach. As he prepared for bed, a creak in the hallway made him pause, his hand on his cane. The game was tightening, and the next revelation would be explosive. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm. The late afternoon sky over London in October 1933 was a bruised gray, heavy with the promise of rain, as Hercule Poirot entered the Worthington mansion in Mayfair. The opulent drawing room with its gilded mirrors and velvet drapes felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves held the secrets of Amelia Worthington's murder. The investigation had reached a fever pitch. The dragon's unease, but he trusted Poirot's method. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his impeccable mustache. "The pressure, it is necessary. The killer hides behind a mask of lies, but in the presence of all, the mask may slip." He surveyed the room, noting the heavy curtains, the ticking grandfather clock, and the portrait of Amelia above the mantel, her eyes seeming to watch the gathering. The suspects filed in, each with a guarded expression. Reginald, his cigar smoldering, his jaw tight. Evelyn, in a crimson dress that matched her defiant smile. Li Wei, his hands clasped, his face unreadable. Clara, fidgeting with her apron, her eyes red. And Dr. Thorpe, his spectacles glinting, his posture rigid. Poirot stood at the room's center, his cane a scepter of authority. "Mes amis," he began, his Belgian accent lending a musical cadence. "We are here to unravel the tragedy of Mademoiselle Amelia Worthington, poisoned in the Jade Dragon tea house. The clues, they are many, but the truth, it is singular. Let us examine the tapestry of deceit." He turned to Reginald, whose cigar trembled slightly. "Monsieur Worthington, your sister intended to disinherit you, no? Her diary reveals your gambling debts, your draining of the family fortune. The cyanide receipt found in your desk, for vermin, you claim. Yet the timing, it is most convenient." Reginald's face reddened. "I told you, Poirot. I was at my club. Witnesses saw me. And that receipt was for the warehouse. Check the records." His voice was loud, but his eyes darted to the others, seeking allies or gauging threats. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle Hartley, your alibi at the Palladium crumbles. The usher saw you leave early, and a witness places a woman in a red coat near the tea house. Your letter to Monsieur Langley, sealed with red wax, threatens to expose Amelia's secrets. Jealousy, perhaps." "Amelia was kind. She knew my secret, about my child, but she protected me. Those stains on my gloves, they're from cleaning, I think." Her voice broke and she buried her face in her hands. Poirot's gaze softened, but he pressed on. "Mademoiselle Claire, your secret, a child with Dr. Thorpe, gives motive, no? And the stains, they suggest cyanide. Yet your grief, it feels true." He turned to Thorpe, whose spectacles caught the firelight. "Doctor, your tonic matched a vial in the tea house, and your red wax matches the brick smudge. Your losses in Worthington shipping, they stung, oui? Enough to poison the one who blocked your salvation." Thorpe adjusted his spectacles, his voice cold. "I prescribed a harmless tonic, Poirot. The wax is common, and my losses were business, not personal. You've no proof." His composure was iron, but a bead of sweat betrayed him. Poirot paced, his cane tapping rhythmically. "The clues, they circle. Red herrings abound. The cyanide receipt, too obvious for Monsieur Worthington. The red coat, too convenient for Mademoiselle Hartley. The note, too poetic for Monsieur Lee. The gloves, too tragic for Mademoiselle Clara. The wax, too precise for Dr. Thorpe. Yet, there is a thread that binds you all." He paused, letting the silence weigh on them. Amelia's diary speaks of smuggling, dragons in the Worthington ships. Someone here feared her exposure. The room grew tense, accusations flickering in the suspect's eyes. Reginald pointed at Evelyn. "She's the one who wanted Charles's money." Evelyn snapped back. "And you'd sell your own sister for a poker game?" Lee remained silent, but Clara sobbed, and Thorpe's hand twitched toward his pocket. Poirot raised a hand. "Not yet the denouement, mes amis. But know this, the killer is among us, and the little gray cells, they see through the fog." He produced the second pearl button, holding it aloft. "Found near my flat, like the first in the alley. A lady's glove, perhaps. The buttons, the wax, the smuggling, they lead to the truth." As the suspects dispersed, their glances heavy with suspicion, Poirot lingered, examining the curtain. A faint smudge of red wax marked its edge. Another clue? Or another taunt? Outside, the storm broke, rain lashing the cobbles. Poirot hailed a cab, his mind racing. The diary's smuggling hint tied to Lee and possibly Thorpe, but Reginald's debts and Evelyn's blackmail were equally compelling. Clara's secret child added a layer of complexity. Had Thorpe used her? The pearl buttons suggested a woman, but the wax pointed to Thorpe or the Worthington estate. The scream in the dark was a desperate act, but whose? As the cab rattled through the wet streets, Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp rap on the window. A gloved hand pressed a note against the glass before vanishing into the rain. "The dragon strikes at midnight." The handwriting matched the previous threats, its ink blurred by rain but unmistakable. Poirot's pulse quickened, not with fear but with the thrill of the chase. The killer was unraveling, their threats a sign of panic. The storm outside mirrored the one within, and Poirot knew the next move would bring him face to face with the truth. Chapter 8. Veils Lifted. The rain lashed London's Mayfair district, turning the cobbles into a glistening mirror as Hercule Poirot stood in the Worthington mansion's drawing room, the echoes of Clara's screams still lingering in the air. It was late afternoon in October 1933, and the storm outside matched the tempest brewing in the investigation of Amelia Worthington's poisoning at the Jade Dragon Tea House. The clues: Amelia's diary revealing a smuggling ring, the dragon's breath note, Clara's stained gloves, the pearl buttons, the red sealing wax, and the latest threatening note, "The dragon strikes at midnight," had drawn a net around the suspects: Reginald Worthington, Evelyn Hartley, Lee Way, Clara Benson, and Dr. Harlan Thorpe. The blackout and scream during their earlier confrontation had been a desperate act, and Poirot's little gray cells hummed with the certainty, calm but commanding. "Mes amis, the darkness was a distraction, but it reveals more than it conceals. The killer, they are among us, and their fear grows." He produced the latest note, its ink smudged by rain. "This message, 'The dragon strikes at midnight,' is a desperate plea to halt our pursuit. But Hercule Poirot does not yield." His gray eyes scanned the room, noting the swaying curtain where he'd found a smudge of red wax, a match to the brick and Thorpe's clinic. He turned to Clara, whose tears had dried but whose hand still shook. "Mademoiselle Clara, you claim innocence, yet your gloves bear cyanide stains. You poured the tea, and you knew of Mademoiselle Worthington's plan to disinherit her brother. Tell me, did you handle her silver sugar case after her death?" Clara's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. I picked up the cup, sir, after she fell. It was chaos, people screaming, the tea spilling. Maybe that's how the stains got there. But I didn't touch her sugar case, I swear. Her sincerity rang true, but Poirot noted her hesitation, a crack in her story. The stains could be from cleaning, as she claimed, or from handling the poisoned cup, a distinction that could mean innocence or guilt. Jap interjected, holding up a lab report. Poirot, the stains on Clara's gloves, definitely cyanide, but trace amounts, like she handled something contaminated after the fact. The sugar case, though, that's where it gets interesting. Early tests show cyanide residue in Amelia's personal sugar, not the tea itself. The room fell silent, the suspects exchanging wary glances. The sugar case, always in Amelia's clutch, was a private ritual. Someone close had tampered with it. Poirot's mustache twitched. The sugar, not the tea. A revelation most significant. The teapot's tampering. It was a red herring, oui. The killer wished us to focus on Monsieur Li's domain. He turned to Li Wei, whose calm faltered for a moment. Monsieur Li. The dragon's breath in Charles's pocket, begging Evelyn for secrecy. Was it a cover for their collusion? Poirot addressed the group. The diary. It reveals much. Mademoiselle Worthington uncovered a smuggling ring, dragons in her family's ships. This secret threatens someone's fortune, perhaps their freedom. The sugar case, tampered with, suggests intimacy with the victim. Who had access? Monsieur Reginald, you were her brother. Mademoiselle Clara, her maid. Dr. Thorpe, her physician. Mademoiselle Evelyn, perhaps through Monsieur Langley. Reginald snorted, tossing his cigar into the fire. I wasn't near her blasted sugar case. I was at my club, as I've said a dozen times. Evelyn smirked, but Clara's eyes filled with tears and Thorpe's hand twitched toward his pocket again. A nervous tick, Poirot noted. Jap's constable returned, breathless. Sir, we found something in the garden. A glove, high-end, with a missing pearl button, like the ones in the alley near Poirot's flat. He held up a single glove, its leather fine, a button gone. Evelyn's hand went to her sleeve, but her gloves were intact. Clara gasped, shaking her head. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A lady's glove or a gentleman's disguise? The killer plays with us, leaving clues to confuse. Poirot's thoughts raced, connecting the smuggling ring to the Worthington fortune. Amelia's diary had hinted at dragon imports, and Li's admission confirmed rumors of illicit cargo. Had Amelia threatened to expose it, prompting her murder? Reginald's debts, Evelyn's blackmail, Thorpe's losses, and Clara's secret child all pointed to motives. But the sugar case required proximity. Thorpe's tonic, matching Li's vial, suggested a possible delivery method. But the lab had found it clean. The red wax linked Thorpe and the Worthington estate, but its commonality made it inconclusive. As the storm raged outside, Poirot paced, his cane tapping rhythmically. The killer. They are clever but not infallible. The sugar, the glove, the wax, these are personal, intimate clues. The dragon strikes at midnight. What does it mean? A deadline, a threat, or a distraction? Clara sobbed. I don't know, sir. I'm no killer. Reginald muttered curses. Evelyn lit another cigarette. Li stared at the floor and Thorpe adjusted his spectacles, his silence deafening. Poirot's eyes lingered on Thorpe's pocket, where his hand kept straying. Was it a weapon, a clue, or nerves? As the clock struck 6, the storm's thunder shook the windows, and Poirot felt the weight of the moment. The glove, The sugar, the smuggling, the wax, all pointed to a conspiracy. But the mastermind remained elusive. He addressed the group. "Return home, but know this. The veils are lifting. The truth will not hide much longer." As the suspects dispersed, their footsteps heavy, Poirot lingered, examining the hidden door. A faint scent of antiseptic lingered. Thorpe's clinic? Or another red herring? Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, but the air was thick with menace. Poirot hailed a cab, clutching the threatening note. As the cab pulled away, a shadow moved in the garden, unseen but felt. The killer was watching. Their time running out. The midnight deadline loomed, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised for the final strike. Chapter 9. The Final Clues. The rain had softened to a faint drizzle over London's Mayfair, but the air of October 1933 remained heavy with foreboding as Hercule Poirot stood in the Worthington Mansion's garden, the hidden door's creak still echoing in his mind. The investigation into Amelia Worthington's poisoning at the Jade Dragon Tea House was reaching its crescendo. The clues, the dragon's breath note, the tampered teapot, Clara's cyanide-stained gloves, the pearl buttons, the red sealing wax, Amelia's diary exposing a smuggling ring, and the threatening "dragon strikes at midnight" note had woven a complex web around the suspects. Reginald, needle in a haystack. Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray eyes gleaming. "Mon ami, the sugar case, it is the heart of the crime, intimate, personal. Only someone close could tamper with it. The glove, it points to wealth, perhaps deception. But the smuggling ring in Mademoiselle Worthington's diary, this dragon imports, it binds the motives. We must follow it." He paced, his cane tapping a steady rhythm, his mind racing through the suspects' connections. Reginald's debts, Evelyn's blackmail, Lee's grudge, Clara's secret child, Thorpe's losses. Their first move was to revisit Dr. Thorpe's clinic in Harley Street, the antiseptic scent from the hidden passage lingering in Poirot's memory. The clinic was quiet, its cabinets gleaming under electric lights. Thorpe, polishing his spectacles, greeted them with a forced smile. "Mr. Poirot, Inspector, what now? I've answered your questions." His voice was clipped, but his hand strayed to his pocket, a tic Poirot had noted before. "Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing. "The sugar case. It was poisoned with cyanide. Your tonic, it was in Mademoiselle Worthington's possession, and your red wax matches the brick's smudge. But more. Your investments in Worthington shipping, tied to dragon imports, perhaps? Amelia's refusal to merge cost you dearly, no?" Thorpe's face hardened. "I told you my tonic was harmless, and the wax is common. As for the shipping, yes, I lost money, but I didn't poison her. I wasn't near her sugar case." His denial was firm, but Poirot noticed a tremble in his fingers. He scanned the desk, spotting a ledger with entries for dragon imports payments, small, but dated just before Amelia's death. A clue, or another distraction? Jap pressed. "We've got a witness placing you at the Worthington mansion days before the murder, Doctor. Care to explain?" Thorpe stammered. "I visited to discuss Amelia's health. Routine, nothing more." But his eyes darted to the ledger, and Poirot made a mental note to seize it for source. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Medical, you say? Monsieur Thorpe, he has access, but so might others in his circle." They summoned Reginald to the yard, where he arrived, cigar in hand, his arrogance fraying. "What now, Poirot? I've got alibis, my club, my friends. You're barking up the wrong tree." Poirot held up the diary entry about his disinheritance. "Your sister plans to cut you out, Monsieur Worthington. And these dragon imports crates, your signature is on their manifests. Were you profiting from smuggling? And did Amelia threaten to expose you?" Reginald's cigar fell, ash scattering. "Smuggling? Nonsense. These crates were tea, business as usual. Amelia was meddling, yes, but I didn't kill her." His voice rose, but his eyes betrayed fear. Poirot noted the manifest's dates aligned with Thorpe's ledger entries, a connection too neat to ignore. Next, they confronted Evelyn Hartley at her Bloomsbury flat. She lounged in a silk robe, her cigarette holder poised. "Really, gentlemen, this is becoming tedious. My alibi's shaky, fine, but I wasn't near her sugar case." Poirot produced the pearl button. "This, mademoiselle, matches your style. And your letter to Monsieur Langley, sealed with red wax. Did you blackmail Amelia over the smuggling?" Evelyn's laugh was sharp. "Blackmail? I told her to let Charles go, that's all. As for the button, I've dozens of gloves, none missing buttons." But her eyes flicked to a drawer, and Poirot signaled Jap to search it. Inside was a letter, unsealed, hinting at Charles's involvement in dragon imports. "Charles and I planned to elope after her death," Evelyn admitted, her voice low. "But I didn't poison her." Poirot's mind raced. The sugar case required access. Clara, as the maid, or Thorpe, as the physician, were closest. Reginald's smuggling ties and Evelyn's elopement plan added motives, but Lee's grudge lingered. Was the dragon note a plant to frame him, or a clue to the Thorpe? But Evelyn's elopement and Clara's secret child added layers. The sugar case was the key. Only someone intimate could poison it. As he pondered, a gunshot rang out in the street below, shattering the quiet. Poirot rushed to the window, seeing only shadows fleeing into the night. A warning shot, or a misfire. The killer was desperate, their midnight deadline looming. Poirot smiled grimly. "The little gray cells, they see the pattern. The sugar, the smuggling, the glove. The truth is near." He made a note to confront Charles Langley again, suspecting his role in the smuggling. The gunshot was a final taunt, but Poirot was ready. The storm had passed, but the final act was about to begin. Chapter 10. The Revelation. The drizzle had ceased over London's Mayfair, leaving the air of October 1933 sharp and clear as Hercule Poirot stood once more in the Worthington Mansion's grand drawing room. The gunshot that had shattered the night outside his flat, a blank as Inspector Japp's men later confirmed, had been a final desperate act to deter him. Yet Poirot's little gray cells were undaunted, their clarity cutting through the fog of clues. Amelia Worthington's poisoned sugar case, the dragon's breath note, Clara's cyanide-stained gloves, the pearl buttons, the red sealing wax, the smuggling ring tied to dragon imports, and the threatening messages culminating in "The dragon strikes at midnight." The suspects, Reginald Worthington, Evelyn Hartley, Lee Way, Clara Benson, and Dr. Harlan Thorpe, were gathered for the denouement, their faces taut with anticipation or dread. The hidden door's antiseptic scent, the glove in the garden, and the lab's confirmation of cyanide in Amelia's sugar had brought Poirot to the precipice of truth. The killer's mask was about to fall. Japp stood by the fireplace, his constables flanking the exits, their presence a silent warning. "Poirot, this better be it," he muttered, his cockney growl softened by trust. "That gunshot was a stunt, but we've got the place." Suggested guilt, but it was too obvious. A red herring. Your signature on Dragon Imports manifests, however, tied you to smuggling. Did Amelia's threat to expose it drive you to act? Reginald's face reddened. "I told you, I was at my club. The smuggling was business, tea, nothing more. I didn't touch her sugar." His voice was loud, but his eyes darted to Thorpe, a flicker of collusion. Poirot shifted to Evelyn, her crimson dress a stark contrast to her pale face. "Mademoiselle Hartley, your broken alibi and blackmail letter to Amelia pointed to jealousy. The pearl buttons, perhaps from your gloves, and your presence near the tea house suggested involvement. Your plan to elope with Monsieur Langley, did it require Amelia's death?" Evelyn's laugh was brittle. "I wanted Charles, not her fortune. I was shopping, not poisoning. Those buttons, I've no gloves missing." Her defiance was thin, her fingers clutching her cigarette holder. Poirot addressed Li Wei, whose calm was a fragile mask. "Monsieur Li, the dragon's breath note seemed to implicate you. Yet it was too poetic, a distraction. Your grudge against the Worthingtons and knowledge of their smuggling gave motive, but your role feels peripheral." Li bowed slightly. "I served tea, not poison. The smuggling rumors were known, but I had no part in her death." His eyes were steady, and Poirot sensed truth. Clara, wringing her hands, spoke unprompted. "Mr. Poirot, I swear, I only poured the tea. The stains on my gloves, they're from cleaning, not murder." Her tears were genuine, but Poirot's gaze lingered on her trembling hands. Finally, he faced Thorpe, whose spectacles glinted coldly. "Dr. Thorpe, your tonic matched a vial in the tea house, and your red wax linked to the threats. Your losses in Worthington shipping tied to Dragon Imports gave motive. And your presence at the mansion, access to the sugar case, no?" The failed shipping merger was desperate. Amelia's refusal to merge, and her discovery of Dragon Imports, a smuggling operation you profited from, threatened your salvation. You devised a plan. Cyanide, obtained through your medical access disguised as a tonic. But you needed an ally to deliver it. He turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle Hartley, your affair with Monsieur Langley was your motive. Amelia's threat to disinherit him endangered your future. You allied with Thorpe, who promised you a share of the fortune through Charles. You, the veiled woman, bought the cyanide, and during a visit to the mansion you slipped it into Amelia's sugar case, knowing her ritual." Poirot produced the lab report. The sugar case's cyanide matched medical-grade purity, accessible to Thorpe. The red wax on the brick and threats, your clinic's brand, Docteur. The pearl buttons, a misdirection. Perhaps from a glove you discarded, Mademoiselle Hartley, to confuse. The dragon's breath note, written by Thorpe, pointed to Monsieur Li, a scapegoat. Clara's stained gloves from handling the cup post-poisoning cleared her. Reginald's receipt, a plant by Thorpe to shift blame. Thorpe struggled, his voice rising. "Lies! You've no proof!" But Poirot held up the ledger from Thorpe's clinic, its dragon imports entries damning. This and the manifests confirm your smuggling. A witness saw Mademoiselle Hartley veiled buying cyanide. The sugar case's residue seals your guilt. Evelyn cracked, her voice low. It was Harlan's idea. He said we'd split the fortune, Charles would inherit and I'd be free. I only put the cyanide in the sugar. Thorpe roared, but Japp's man cuffed him, his spectacles falling to the floor. Poirot's eyes softened as he addressed Clara, Lee, and Reginald. You were pawns. Your motives exploited to obscure the truth. The smuggling ring. It was the heart of the crime. Amelia's exposure threatened Thorpe's empire and Evelyn's dream.